Can Denver Broncos quarterback Russell Wilson bounce back here in 2023 in a big way? That's the biggest question surrounding the Denver Broncos this offseason. You get that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
After a disastrous 2022 NFL campaign, can Russell Wilson turn things around here for the Broncos this upcoming season? We have some big questions ahead of the season for this Broncos team. You'll get that on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. And shout out to all the everydayers out there. Subscribe or follow for free wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube so you never miss out on an episode as soon as it's made available. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, credentialed Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, my good friend, my sidekick, Sayre Bedinger. He's the site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. And Sayre, at this point of the offseason, we're getting into the biggest questions surrounding this team right now, right? We've been looking at positions, the biggest strengths, biggest weaknesses, question marks, but now we're looking at the biggest overall arching questions here for this Broncos team going into the season. And look, I think the biggest one is, can Russell Wilson turn things around here this upcoming season? There's so much pressure on him, and he has to perform this year. Yeah,
the number one question for the Denver Broncos, is number 3, right? It's Russell Wilson. Can Russ cook? Can he still cook, right? What is he going to look like, physically? How is he going to respond from the disaster that was the 2022 season when the highest of expectations were heaped onto Russell Wilson's shoulders? And honestly, it just felt, you could feel that weight on him, right? Watching him play, just watching the Denver Broncos, seeing the way that he was leading the team. And I think Russell did a great job of showing toughness through a lot of different, the variety of injuries that he had last year, Cody, was way more extensive than I think anybody realized. Obviously, he came in with the injury, remember the gross injury that he had to his finger when he was with the Seattle Seahawks. And he came to Denver with a lingering knee issue, which he had to have a scope on after the season. And then during the season, you had the torn lat, you had the torn hamstring, you had the concussion, you had all these different things and all these different factors playing in, not to mention that Russell, he had put on some weight last offseason to try to alleviate the injury risk, right? Which ended up actually kind of going the opposite direction. So it was tough to watch because we came to know a certain version of Russell Wilson, Danger Russ, right? One of the most clutch quarterbacks to ever do it. And one of the best quarterbacks over a 10-year stretch in NFL history. Can he bounce back now in 2023 after, I'm sure he's had time to reflect, Cody. I'm sure he said, I cannot wait to hear from Russell Wilson whenever he meets the media again. Can't wait to hear about what this offseason was like for him, what he learned in reflecting and watching the film from last year, how he's feeling physically, all these different things, because he is the number one question mark on this team right now.
And, there's so many things I want to pinpoint about last year, like how disastrous it was. But I also feel like as time progresses, I think people have forgotten those final stretches of the games, right? Like where he put his body on the line and dove to try to will the Broncos to a victory, took a massive shot, had the concussion, had a scary, scary moment there. And then, when he came back, he played well against the Chargers. That led them to a 31-28 victory at the end of the season. Competed and outdueled a little bit with the Kansas City Chiefs. Unfortunately, and a very, very bad offensive pass interference call on Courtland Sutton really, I think, negated the impact and the outcome of that game. It could have made a tremendous difference. Denver competed with the Kansas City Chiefs with Russell Wilson, minus the 27-0 kind of first half that you had until Denver closed the gap with a furious comeback there. But Russell Wilson is the biggest question mark. And look, if you can answer this question early on and that he can play at a high level and he can continue to do that, then that question goes away. You have it answered there. Because last year there were so many different things there. And look, a former Broncos offensive tackle, Billy Turner, went on the radio in New York and was asked about it. And he said, the media. And he said everything, not just blaming us in the media, but kind of saying like when you traded for Russ, like everyone created these crazy expectations that, hey, they're going to go to the Super Bowl this year. And when you have everything else, he said there was so much going on with this team. It wasn't just Russell Wilson's fault. It just wasn't Nathaniel Hackett's fault. He said, as an offense, we sucked. That's what he said. So I can appreciate the honesty of Billy Turner there from that standpoint. And can it change now? I think the biggest question, that maybe comes in alliance with Russell Wilson is how does he benefit from Sean Payton's coaching, right? This is a guy where Sean Payton was like, hey, Drew was blowing me up off. He's like, hey, you going to work with Russ? All these different things going on there. I really am curious to see if Russ can turn it around and play better. What is the biggest thing we need to see him do from a playing standpoint? Sometimes not putting the ball into harm's way. Last year he just had so many unorthodox moments where he threw the ball into like double coverage or triple coverage, and we're like, wait, what is he doing? Why is he doing that? Very unorthodox, some of the stuff we saw from Russ last year. Will that change this year in 2023? I mean, I tell you what, we don't know the answer to that question, but I think our biggest thing is we hope so.
We do. And Sean Payton said, remember last year when he was working for Fox, that clip that went kind of viral a little bit, at least among Broncos country, of somebody asking, I think it was Colin Cowherd asked him, like, what would you do to fix Russell Wilson, right? And he's like, well, first things we're going to do is we're going to get the list of his greatest hits out, and we're going to, start to play those greatest hits. We're going to have those song lyrics available. I think he even reiterated that, Cody, earlier this offseason when he was hired by the Broncos or shortly after. But really, he put his money where his mouth is in terms of that exact thing. I mean, bringing out Russ's greatest hits. What did he do? First pick in the draft. He went and got Marvin Mims. What's the greatest hit of Russell Wilson's career? It's that deep ball to Tyler Lockett, to Doug Baldwin, to DK Metcalf, that moon ball that comes down and just drops perfectly in the breadbasket for all those guys. So you go in the draft and you get a guy who runs 4.3 and somebody who has one of the best. I've seen some of the advanced metrics on him, Cody, in terms of his ability to track the ball, his ability to do this, that, and the other. It seems like Marvin Mims is tailor-made to be he's going to keep that baseline going. He's just going to be that model of consistency. If you want to play Russell Wilson's greatest hits, you just got a really good bass player, somebody who's going to keep things rolling consistently, have that greatest hit always available. And I think that's the main thing, right, is to get Russ back to being Russ. Like the Broncos showed last year, they can beat the Justin Herberts of the world with Russell Wilson. And yes, the Chargers were trying in that last game. So anybody who tries to diminish what they did, there was a lot of people who wanted Brandon Staley fired for the way that they actually tried in that game and failed. Russell Wilson went out and beat them. I think, Cody, you're right. That game against Kansas City where Cortland Sutton was called for OPI, it's plays like that make the difference in a game against Kansas City. Just ask the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl about a little pass interference penalty that helped the Kansas City Chiefs win the game, that my 6-year-old son still says, Dad, the Chiefs are cheaters. I mean, they cheated to win that game. I think it's so funny, but it's those little things that Russell Wilson, throughout the course of a year. How about in Seattle, week 1 of the season, a couple of toe taps away from winning that game by 10 or more points, right? So it's just the little things throughout the season that compounded over the course of time. I was like, I think Russell felt like he had to do way more than he needed to do because the offense was sucking so bad, as Billy Turner put it, right? And so I think we just need to get Russ back to being Russ, get that ground game going, let him be the point guard, the guy who can take those deep shots every so often, and the guy who can use his legs to make plays, because when he's healthy, man, he's still dynamic in that regard as well.
Can Russ turn it around here in 2023? That's one of our biggest questions we have on today's episode of the show. We have another one as well. The Broncos seem to be going with a youth movement at the cornerback position. Is it enough to carry them over the top defensively? You'll get that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Built Bar. And as all of you know, it is the best tasting protein bar out there on the market. It is jam-packed with protein. It's covered in 100% milk chocolate. It's soft. It's easy to chew, or you can put it in the freezer or the fridge for an hour for a little bit of a crunchier bite. But when you bite into this protein bar, it tastes just like a candy bar. That is Built Bar. They come in the original bars or the Built Puffs, which is marshmallow fluff covered in milk chocolate. You have to try it today. If you've never tried Built Bar, we're encouraging you to do so right now. Churro Puff, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, a wide variety of flavors Built Bar has for you to try here today. And if you want to go locally and get it, you can go to your local Walmart and you can get a box of 4 Built Bars in your pharmacy department of your Walmart. Or If you want to go buy in bulk, you can go to Sam's Club and buy a box of 13 Built Bars. Or if you want to go online, Built.com, and find a box to have it delivered to your door, make sure you use promo code LOCKEDON15. You're going to get 15% off your order today at Built.com. Built Bar, check it out.
Despite having one of the best players in the game at the cornerback position, is cornerback one of the bigger question marks for the Denver Broncos going forward into the 2023 season? As Cody previously mentioned, a bit of a youth movement there opposite Pat Surtain. Cody, I'm excited about this position, to be honest with you. I know we talk about it as a question mark, but I really like the talent here. I really like what the Broncos are doing. I like the vision, as Sean Payton may say, of the players that they're bringing in. And I think there's a lot of upside here. I think there's the upside to potentially have, dare I say, a bit of an embarrassment of riches at the outside cornerback spot. If you got three guys who can be legit starters in the NFL, but they are taking a bit of a calculated risk opposite Pat Surtain, to be honest. Where are you at with this in terms of the cornerback position opposite PS2 being a question mark here in 2023?
Well, I feel like probably the bigger question is, can the youth movement benefit Denver, right? Anytime you move on from a veteran guy, I think it's always good to have a veteran cornerback. It's good to have those guys in your locker room. But anytime you move on from a guy, and we're talking about Ronald Darby this offseason, it was unfortunate. And part of me still wondering, is there a chance at any point of the season that Denver can bring back Ronald Darby? He's going through the process. Obviously he suffered the ACL tear in week 5, unfortunately, but Denver had to move on because of the salary cap implications. They really liked what they saw from Damari Mathis. George Payton has really indicated that they believe that he's a starter in the NFL. But is it enough, right? You go out in the offseason, you get Tremont Smith, who right now on paper, the vision, if we're really looking at it based on the writing on the wall, is that, this is a guy who's probably going to be competing for a roster spot here at training camp. He signed a 1-year deal. It doesn't mean he's guaranteed to play this year with the Broncos. And basically, you look at how many snaps he played on the special team side of the ball in comparison to defense, 2% of the defensive snaps in Houston in 2022. It begs the question, is he going to play defense for the Broncos this upcoming season? To be honest with you, looking at the writing on the wall, it doesn't seem like it. We thought the return aspect was going to be there, but then now you throw Marvin Mims into the mix there. Okay, all of a sudden, Tremont Smith might have to be looking over his shoulder in training camp. Denver's got a lot of guys right now at cornerback, but they're all young for the most part, Sarah. You have guys like Delonte Hood, Fayon Hicks, who was a 7th-round draft pick last year, who was at rookie minicamp over the weekend because they don't have a full accredited season to their name yet in the NFL. You have other guys behind Damari Mathis, and then you have Riley Moss, who you drafted in the 3rd round of the 2023 NFL draft. And tell you what, just looking at him, he's got fluid footwork, fluid hips. He's very reactive, and he's got great technique from the cornerback position. Now here's the deal, okay? I played cornerback. I love it. I've coached cornerback. It's one of my favorite positions, one of the most challenging positions. And watching how he plays, you could definitely tell that he belongs here. Now, if he starts as a rookie, he's going to be tested this upcoming season. But I also say maybe in terms of the youth movement at cornerback, we already know Pat Surtain, he's the top dog, man. He is cornerback number 1, and it's not even close. And then you also have questions like, is Damari going to start this year, or is it going to be Riley Moss? Is there going to be competition there? This is the one thing I don't think we've had answered by Sean Payton. Other positions, he said there's going to be competition, but is Damari the guy, or is Riley Moss going to maybe throw his name in the hat a little bit? Then you have Art Green, undrafted rookie free agent cornerback out of Houston, who also looks pretty damn solid here. We're going to see a little bit more in training camp, but Denver's got some young guys that could potentially play, and you know what? They have a coach there who is viewed very, very, very highly in Christian Parker.
Yeah, they do. So that's what gives me confidence in this group, Cody. It makes it a bit less of a question mark to me. I have a bit more faith in the cornerbacks than I do, let's say, like we talked about in the weaknesses episode about the edge position. So I feel a bit more confident in these guys because we did see a quick progression last year from Damari Mathis, as opposed to somebody like Nick Bonito off the edge. And of course, it's apples and oranges, right? We're comparing two very different positions, two different players. But we saw that, Damari Mathis against the Chargers, the 4 pass interference penalties. And then we saw him bounce back from that game to have a really consistently good season. And just in all facets, right? It wasn't just in coverage. It was also in run support. It was also doing, XYZ, all the different things that he was asked to do. He did them well last year in that defense. And I think going back to his days at college, a lot of people thought he was probably a better fit for a defense like Vance Joseph's, where he's going to be playing a lot more man coverage than he did under the Ejiro Evero defense. So I'm excited to see what he can do in year 2. And I think the best case scenario for the Broncos is that he progresses and establishes himself as a guy that you Sharpie into that spot, right? That cornerback 2 spot opposite Patrick Surtain. Because now you get a tough decision from the coaching staff to say, okay, K'Wan Williams, a veteran player, Riley Moss, a young guy that we really like. Do we want to try Riley Moss out at some nickel? I know he mentioned at rookie minicamp, and I know they're not doing everything full. It's I think Sean Payton called it like football school, but I know he mentioned doing some work from the slot at rookie minicamp. So going to be kind of interested to see how the Broncos try to weave all these guys into the equation and who ends up on the field, because these guys have one of the biggest responsibilities, right? You're going to be tasked with going out there on 3rd and 7. You got to stop Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. You got to break up a pass. You got to play the right technique. You have to be in the right spot. You have to do the right thing. These young guys are getting tasked with a big responsibility. It's not just, can you play well over the course of the season? It's, can you play well over the course of the season and go break up a pass intended for Mike Williams 50 yards downfield when your team is up by 6 points late in the 4th quarter and you have a chance to really make a game-saving play? Can you intercept a pass that you have an opportunity to take back maybe for 6, or your team is down by 13, they need a game-changing play? Can you take an interception back to the house, Riley Moss, like you did a number of times at Iowa? These are the questions that I have, because they did it in college. Damari Mathis did it last year as a rookie. Can they do it now consistently as, being relied upon in a big pressure-filled situation?
I almost feel like your cornerback room in today's NFL has to be a committee approach in a sense. Not like taking anybody off the field, but you have to have a number of guys that can step up in various packages. And, there's Jaquan McMillan, who was an undrafted rookie free agent last year, did really well against the Chargers in that final game, covered Mike Williams and limited what he was able to do. He was working on the outside in that game. Well, even at mandatory rookie minicamp that we saw here this past week, he was getting some work inside the slot. So, a guy that they believe can play either outside or inside is good. That means that there's going to be competition there for, guys like Sayre Bassey who are back this year. So guys like Jaquan McMillan, where Bassey has the advantage is he stepped up for K'Wan last year when K'Wan went down, but he also played an impact role on special teams. Can Riley Moss do that? That's where Riley Moss, I think, is going to get his first opportunity to maybe play some defensively this season, is by going out there and excelling on special teams. And, this past week in a rookie minicamp, he was all over the field on special teams. He was one guy that was going down doing the things that the coaches were asking him to do. Granted, everything's in a vacuum at this point, but I like the progress. I like the steps that are being taken here. But yeah, the youth movement at cornerback is a huge question mark. Can it pay off for the Denver Broncos? Broncos Country, we're eager for your thoughts on this as well. If you're watching on YouTube, comment in the section down below. Interact with other members of Broncos Country. If you're listening wherever you get your podcast, make sure you tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But one of the bigger questions, perhaps, when we look at this Broncos upcoming season, outside of Russell Wilson, outside of the youth movement at cornerback, how will Sean Payton do in his first season as Broncos head coach? This is a huge question considering the history of what we have encountered here with previous head coaches in Denver. You'll get that on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. Real quick, let me tell you to check out the Locked On Nuggets podcast hosted by Adam Ades and Matt Moore. The Denver Nuggets are in the Western Conference Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers. What does the series look like? How is it going? Can Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray and MPJ, can they find a way to outscore the Los Angeles Lakers, to limit LeBron James and Anthony Davis? You're going to get all that action and more on the Locked On Nuggets podcast, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. After going through a multitude of head coaches since Gary Kubiak stepped away initially, the Broncos have been trying to find an answer at the head coaching position alongside quarterback for quite some time. Do they maybe have that at quarterback with Russell Wilson? That's one thing we talked about today. But can Sean Payton break the curse that is going on with Broncos head coaches as he prepares for his first season here as a member of the Denver Broncos? Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. And shout out to all the everydayers out there and even the casual listeners who listen to 1 to 2 to maybe 3 times a week. Bump that up to 5 times a week because we have you covered every single day. If you want to be the best informed about what's going on with your Denver Broncos, Locked On Broncos is the place to be. Thank you so much, Broncos Country. All right, Sayre, let's ask the question, how will Sean Payton do in his first season as head coach of the Denver Broncos? When you take this job, regardless whoever it is, when someone takes the job to be the head coach of the Denver Broncos, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. There's a big responsibility in the eyes of Broncos country, just like quarterback. I'd say quarterback and head coach, those are the two positions here in Denver that you have to be really damn good at, or else fans' patience with you is going to run very, very thin. How do we think maybe Sean Payton's going to do here in his first season as the guy?
I think he's going to do extremely well, Cody. I really do. And I think Sean Payton's going to have an incredible first season with the Denver Broncos. And I was telling you before we recorded this show, I really believe that Sean Payton may be the most underrated pickup that any NFL team made in the entire 2023 offseason. And here's the reason why. He had one offense with the New Orleans Saints that ranked outside of the top 12 in scoring, which was the 2021 season, his final season with the team. Everybody knows what happened that season. If you don't, let me tell you, Jameis Winston started the year for the New Orleans Saints as their number one quarterback. He was on pace for 50 touchdowns in the first 6 games of the season. The 7th game, he goes down with a knee injury. He's replaced by Trevor Siemian and Taysom Hill, mostly Taysom Hill throughout the rest of that 2021 season. Sean Payton in that Saints offense, they were 5-7 at one point. They finished 9-8 with Taysom Hill as QB1. I mean, if that doesn't indicate to you how good this guy has been, how consistent this guy has been throughout the years. I know everybody likes to mention, well, he had Drew Brees in that time. Well, guess what? Nathaniel Hackett had Russell Wilson, and they didn't do well together. We've seen a number of instances and situations where quarterbacks and good coaches, they just don't always work well together. Tom Brady was with the Buccaneers last year. They had a losing record, and he played statistically very well. I think Sean Payton is this type of coach, Cody, he elevates everybody in the organization. He elevates everybody on the field. It's not just about what we talked about with him playing Russell Wilson's greatest hits, right? He knows how to play every player's greatest hits. He talks about it. We got to listen to these nuggets. The vision for every single player, every individual player has a clear vision from the head coach, which the position coaches, they understand that vision. Because why? Because Sean Payton does a great job of communicating that vision. They understand how to maximize the talent around them. He's consistently done that, whether it's Hall of Fame caliber players like Drew Brees to undrafted free agents like we talked about before, like Pierre Thomas, or 7th rounders like Marcus Colston. He gets the best out of his guys. I think he's the most underrated addition any team made this offseason. I think he's going to have a huge first year with the Broncos.
I think that's fair to pinpoint, right? And I want to make reference to a few things that I've noticed as well, right? When Vance Joseph was the head coach for the Broncos, and I attended training camp, and, I'd watch Vance. Vance was very involved, going around from position to position at training camp, being involved in the practice structure and everything like that. When Vic Fangio was the head coach, he would come around and guys would tighten up a little bit, right? Because this Vic Fangio, he's very, stern, it's my way or the highway in a sense. And then with Nathaniel Hackett, it was like there was just this lax nature, right? Which could be a good thing if you're winning. And obviously, if you're not winning, it's not a very good thing. And then with Sean Payton, it just seems like there's balance, right? It feels like there's finally an adult in the room, right? Someone who's not going to be too overly stern, but someone's like, hey, we're on the field. We have an objective. We need to get this done. But then he also finds time to also have fun, with his coaches, with his players as well. But everything on the football field, it's business, business, business. We have a goal, and if we want to win games, this is what we need to do. I like that approach there. And, I've coached with a couple of guys in my career like that. And as a coach, I can tell you, it makes you better. It makes you stay on your toes, because if you're not being challenged as a coach, whether you're a coordinator, whether you're a position coach, you might be in the wrong profession. And it's good to be challenged. It's good to get out of your comfort zone. And the one thing I would say that I really like so far about what I've seen from Sean Payton, granted this was just the one practice we had access to, was the fact that it seems like he trusts his coaches with the overall thing. What he's communicating to these guys, those guys are communicating that to their position groups. There's synergy. It's one common message, and everybody seems to be on the same page for now. That is a good thing. Can they keep that up? I think that's a dynamic to watch here in training camp when it comes up here in July, and even in the preseason. What does this team look like? And then once they get to the regular season, everything is going to be under the evaluation scope a little bit bigger going forward. But I'm with you, Sayre. I think it's a great addition to the Broncos. Sean Payton, I think, is the guy that they needed out of everybody. I know we also, when we went back and talked about head coaching favorites, maybe who we'd like, it's easy in hindsight. Okay, we had our preferences with some guys. There were some things that maybe we even talked about, like, I don't know about Sean Payton. I don't know if Sean Payton's the right guy for the job. It seems like Denver got the right guy for the job in this situation. And look, hopefully he can turn it around. Hopefully the Broncos can win games. I'm excited to see what the Sean Payton factor can do, not only just for Russell Wilson, but for the rest of this organization who desperately needs to find a way to turn things around to win football games again. Sean Payton, I think, is the best guy for the job. Broncos Country, do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Make sure you let us know in the YouTube comments down below. Make sure you interact with other members of Broncos Country. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But Broncos Country, that will wrap up today's episode of the show. For all you everydayers out there, here's what you can expect on Monday's episode and Tuesday's episode of next week. Sayre and I, we're taking a look at the schedule here once again. The Broncos, can they tackle the AFC West Division? Can they finally make claim to regain what they haven't had in quite some time? And we're also going to take a look on Tuesday's episode of the show about the AFC East. The Broncos are going to face a lot of familiar faces. The ghosts of girlfriends past return in the AFC East this season when Denver takes on that tough division. You'll get that for all you everydayers in the coming days and weeks here, Locked On Broncos. We appreciate you. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday for a brand new episode of the show.